What's going on, guys? It's Brandon back here again today, and today we're going to be talking about an offer sheet that happened back in 1995. I'm wearing a Coyotes jersey. You'll understand why soon. We got my normal one on, my original Phoenix Coyotes one. You can see the patch there. So, on October 3rd, 1995 at 9 a.m., Keith Tkachuk was a restricted free agent who was not happy with the way things were run in Winnipeg. The old Winnipeg Jets, the current Arizona Coyotes, became the Phoenix Coyotes and then the Arizona Coyotes. So Chicago makes an offer sheet to the cash-strapped Winnipeg Jets at 9 a.m. The Hawks signed Keith Tkachuk to a offer sheet after trade attempts fail. They had been trying to trade for him for a while. And for 6 hours, the Hawks were odds-on favorites to win the Stanley Cup, as Tkachuk was a very upcoming power forward. He had 22 goals and 29 assists in the year prior in 48 games. That was a shortened season. The Hawks would have owed their 5 first-round picks. I don't like this light that's right behind me. Let me see if I can fix this board so I can fix that a little bit. There we go. That's much better. And so they would have owned their 5. They would have owed their 5 first-round draft picks to the Coyotes, which at that point, it's a little dicey. You don't know how it's going to go. I would say do it, especially after you see what the Hawks get, but we'll get there. 3 p.m., the Jets match the $17 million over 5 years. It would be a large reason to why the Jets would be sold and eventually moved to the desert in Phoenix. So the Jets were cash-strapped, and they surprisingly did the deal. It was actually a major surprise around the league that the Jets were able to match that deal, and especially after Tkachuk had come out and said he would not play in Winnipeg any under circumstances and wanted to play in Chicago. Any under circumstances? Well, he ended up playing in Winnipeg one final year in 95-96. And don't go black screen on me. There we go. But yeah, he wanted to play in Chicago, which is funny because he never would play in Chicago. But Tkachuk ends up being in Winnipeg for that final year in 95-96. And then they move to the desert in Phoenix, where he dons this jersey for, I think, was it 97, 98, 99, 2000, maybe for 4 years, where he would ironically play with Roenick. And if we wanted to talk about who those 5 first-round picks would have been for Chicago to give up, Marco Sturm, good player. Daniel Cleary, good player. Ty Jones, never heard of. Mark Bell was part of the ABC line in Chicago during the mid-2000s. Steve McCarthy. I would have given up that in a heartbeat for Keith Tkachuk at that time. In 1995-96, this is before the 95-96 season. The Hawks are a good team. They're not a great team. 95-96, they go 40-20, but without Tkachuk, they end up going 40, 28, and 14 for 94 points. They were second in the Central, third in the West, 8th in goals for with 273, 5th in goals against with 220. They swept Calgary in the first round in 4. They lose to Colorado chokingly, and 4-2. That series they won in overtime in Game 1 in Colorado. They lost Game 2 after Belfour got food poisoning, which is a whole other thing. Game 3 they win in overtime. Game 4 they lose in triple overtime when they had a chance to take a stranglehold on the series. And they lose Games 5, and then Game 6 they lose in overtime. I think. 6 in overtime? I don't remember. But that is also all without Tkachuk. With Tkachuk, this team already gets a whole lot better. If you want to go through the lines, the guy Tkachuk replaced was Jeff Shantz, who was a third, fourth line center kind of guy in my eyes. So I did the lines based off points of what they would have been with Tkachuk. First line, you would have had Keith Tkachuk, Jeremy Roenick, Tony Amonte. That already is a fantastic line. Second line, a young Eric Daze, who hasn't had injury problems. Bernie Nichols, Joe Murphy, who had a great year. Joe Murphy, of course, tragic story what happened there, but he had a pretty good year that year. Murray Craven, Dennis Savard, and Bob Probert. You can honestly take Craven and switch him with Krivo Krasov and Probert with Poulin, but Savard, at that point he was in his mid to late 30s, but he was back from the Hawks for his second stint, his second of his 3 years before he came back for, and he was still a good player. He was still putting up point a game in the playoffs. Well, not in 96, but in 95 he was. In the fourth line, we had Krivo Krasov, Brent Sutter, and Poulin. Jeff Shantz was the odd man out, so I put him on the side. The defense, Gary Suter, Chris Chelios, excellent. Keith Carney, Eric Weinrich, it's okay. Third pair, Ulanov and Steve Smith. I've actually never heard of Ulanov before doing this video. Steve Smith, iconic. He was already old at this time. Carney was still middle of the pack age. Weinrich has been there for a while. And then Cam Russell, who I did not like watching back tapes. He's a big fighter guy. He's the odd man out. He'd be the seventh defenseman. And in net, you have Belfour and Hackett. You put Tkachuk on this team, you create an even better team that was already here. Instead of being third in the Central, they might have been second up past Colorado. They might have been second in goals for, because Detroit, that was the year they had 62 wins, and I imagine they got some of those wins against the Hawks, which they might have got back if Tkachuk would have been here. So, as you can see, we were robbed of basically Tkachuk, Roenick, Amante, or Tkachuk, Roenick, Daze, or Tkachuk, Roenick, Nichols. Whoever you want to put it, or Tkachuk, Roenick, Savard, whoever one you want to put on that line would have been fantastic. Roenick should be in the Hall of Fame. Keith Tkachuk should be in the Hall of Fame. Dennis Savard is in the Hall of Fame. Chris Chelios is in the Hall of Fame. Gary Suter, Tony Amante, those two, fantastic. I'm looking at disc players on here. Ed Belfour, Hall of Famer. You already would have... how many Hall of Famers would you actually have? You've had Savard, you had Belfour, you had Chelios. Ed, Tkachuk, and Roenick, I'm for sure both of them get into the Hall of Fame, especially if they win a cup. This would also lead into the period where, because Tkachuk doesn't sign, the Hawks eventually just say throw it out, and they trade Roenick the following offseason. Belfour is gone by the deadline of 96-97, and the entire team falls apart. And it's all because of this right here, I think, is what set it off. Not getting Keith Tkachuk ruined this franchise for a decade. I'd say 98 through 2008, and it was a mistake. It was something that Winnipeg did to screw over the Hawks. And if you want to point to the team that really screwed over the Hawks the most in this time period, the Winnipeg Jets, now known as the Arizona Coyotes, because Roenick goes eventually to Arizona. Belfour goes to San Jose for the playoffs and then goes to Dallas. Well, not for the playoffs. He just ended up there. Daze is an injury-riddled mess. Nichols is obviously older. Savard, Suter, they're older. Probert's older. Krivo-Krasov really never developed. Amante would be basically the franchise of this team. Amante and Daze would be basically the leaders of this team from then on. Gary Suter didn't stick around long. Chelios was gone by 99. Steve Smith was old. But yeah, that's really all I have for you guys today. Just showing you how one offer sheet changed the trajectory of the Blackhawks franchise, making them basically into a punching bag in the league from 98 to 2008. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you were around back then, please let me down below your reaction to this, if you remember this, and how your thoughts were at the time. Did you see the Hawks just having a freaking rinse-around cycle and eventually just die after the second round of that against Colorado? And also, this could be also contributed to Dollar Bill Wirtz. Bill Wirtz, an awful owner of the Blackhawks. And didn't want to pay Roenick, and Roenick left. He wanted to trade, so they traded him. It was it's a rough thing to look back on and think this is what kind of spiraled when they could have been good. They could have still been making the playoffs all those years. Even if they couldn't get a cup, it would have been important to keep Roenick around, keep Tkachuk, Amante, Daze. Those they could have developed into that next generation, mold it. You got two lines right there because Amante could play center. Roenick could always play wing. Daze, he could play on both sides. It was tough. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, leave your thoughts down below. If you were I said before this time, leave a comment down below what your thoughts were. If you were after this was born like I was, tell me down below what you really looking back on this, what the Hawks could have been. Could they have won a Stanley Cup with this core of Tkachuk, Roenick, Chelios, Belfour would have stuck around, but along with the Hasek, there were a lot of things in the 90s that the Hawks did wrong. Let's put it that way. That led to this. Thank you guys so much for watching for the last time, and I shall see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.